Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where I shake my brain nipples every day so I can get some of that dirty YouTube money to be able to afford to teach you folks classes in the real world. Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com. We have classes in Durham, North Carolina. You come, you learn, you go the hell away. The way education was meant to be. Anyways, I'm very excited about Silicon Dojo right now. Our next class is coming up on Wednesday, and we only have one seat left. One! That's cool. 45 spots are open, 44 have been taken, and I think that's a good sign for Silicon Dojo. If you do want to support the things that I do, there is a donor box link down below. I'm just saying, donor box exists. Anyways, wow. Hey, do you all know how I can get back to the United States? I seem to have gotten lost on the internet, and I'm trying to figure out how to get back to the country that I know and have a passive-aggressive relationship with. How do I get back to America? 'Cause wow, we are currently in a very, very weird world under the Trump administration, and it'll be curious to see how all of this fleshes out at the end of the day. Now, a lot of people out there, they're like, Eli, why do you talk about politics on a technology channel? Isn't this a Linux channel? No. No, this was never a Linux channel. What the fuck are you talking about? Anyways, it is a technology channel, but the big thing to understand is, right, technology, especially now in the modern world, right, is in the middle of everything. You need hardware to function. You need coders to write code. You need customers, all of that kind of stuff, right? When politics goes all wonkadoodle, in fact, it does mean the technology industry will go wonkadoodle too. Again, it's interesting out there. I have some of these folks, and they're like, Eli, why are you have TDS? Why are you talking about politics? Because it's things like the steel tariffs. It's things like the steel tariffs. If you have a rack of servers, like whenever you think about servers, when you think about the server, right, you think about the object or whatever, but we talk about racking servers, right? So you have these server racks. They're called U's, each unit for putting in there. You have a 1U server, a 2U server, a 4U server. God help you if you have something like a 6U server, one of those big Cisco things where you got to have a little forklift to put the damn thing into the rack. Well, here's an interesting thing about those racks. Here's something that you might not have thought about with those racks. Those racks are made out of steel. It's pure steel. There is no Node.js code in a server rack. The entire damn thing is steel. And it's actually quite a bit of steel. And when you build out, data centers, right, you have a raised flooring in general. It's really cool for the cooling system. The air actually goes under all of the servers and then comes up through the servers themselves. But yeah, you need steel, all this kind of stuff for those raised floorings. The building needs steel, the whole 9 yards. So, if you're talking about building AI data centers, right, everybody's hyper-focused. Eli, what about the NVIDIA GPUs? Which, yeah, don't get me wrong, NVIDIA GPUs are important. You do need those for AI, but you also need server racks. You also need a building. You also need raised floors. It's amazing. There's so much in this world that is just not built with code. My roof does not have a single line of code in it. So anyways, that's why I talk about this stuff. And all the stuff going on right now is really wonkadoodle. Again, it's interesting with China. I mean, you think about how the world might change in the blink of an eye. So they're doing these rare earth licensing schemes. So basically, China basically decided if the United States could try to have control over anything that we saw in our peripheral vision, then by God, they should be able to do it too. So it's like, if there's any product that gets sold from China that has like over 0.1% of rare earths, or maybe 0.01, it's a it's a decimal place of a percent, that they should have the authority to say who can or cannot buy that rare earth. And so, you start thinking about phones, and you start thinking about cars, and you think about all the stuff that your node, scripts actually have to run on. And all of a sudden, basically, China is stating they should have control, essentially, over the entire technology world. Oh, Whitey wants to control AI? China man's just gonna control tech. And so this is an important thing to be thinking about. Like, it's with the whole, conversation about the repair industry, right? So when I started in technology, again, I started in the U.S. Army as an electronics repair technician. So if you go back 30 years, right, repairing electronics made a lot of sense because of basically the manufacturing processes at the time, right? It was difficult to manufacture all the products that people wanted. The components that were used were relatively easy to repair and that type of deal. And so at one time, before my generation, a lot of companies actually provided schematics to their equipment so that you could repair it, right? They knew that the price of the product was so high that if your product died and you couldn't repair it and you were forced to buy a new one, you would probably never buy one of their products again, right? That was a piece of garbage. I'll never touch it again. So they actually gave you, the information for how to repair it so that you could keep it functional, so that you would feel like your product was good, right? As time has gone by, what they've decided is that they'd rather make things smaller, more integrated, the whole 9 yards, make repair a lot more difficult, with the idea that you will replace it, right? Now that we have refresh cycles, so you got to think about it, right? Before 2000, the whole concept of a refresh cycle really wasn't something that went through people's minds, right? The planned obsolescence went through people's minds, but you wouldn't, like if you bought a refrigerator, if you bought a car, if you bought a washing machine, you didn't refresh that thing every 3 or to 5 years. You just kept using it until you died, right? But then we get to this modern world where we have refresh cycles. Why bother with making things repairable when people are simply going to refresh them, replace them, most likely before they're even before their end of life anyway? So ergo, make them in such a way that they're not repairable, because that will get them to buy new ones more, right? And that's one of the things to be thinking about in the technology world, right? The repair world, the repair A+ technician world, going in and repairing computer hardware, that sector basically died because the world changed, the world moved on. And so an interesting thing to be thinking about now, right, with China and the United States doing whatever the hell we're doing. You got to understand, one of the things you have to understand, one of the things the China man don't get, right? The China man keeps watching me, and they're like, yeah, fuck Whitey. I'm like, look, guys, look. Here's it. I am American, so I'm pissed off about our policies. We need to train more STEM students. We need STEM in our schools. We need to be teaching people how to create factories. Again, I've had a consulting company. I've had a managed service provider company. I've done a lot of different things. I've done this whole content creation thing, right? If I wanted to create a restaurant, I functionally know how to create a restaurant. If I wanted to create a consulting company, I know how to create a consulting company. There's a lot of things, right? If I want to create a construction company, I'd probably figure out how to create a construction company. I've got to tell you though, right? I do not have the skill set. I do not understand what's required to create a factory, right? If I was like, yes, everything needs to be reshored, God bless Trump, I'm gonna build my own factory. How? I think I need a lathe. Does anybody have a lathe? I think factories need lathes. Get me a lathe, right? Anyways, that's one of my problems with the whole Trump policy here, is I don't see how we are building the systems to reshore, and that's one of my big concerns here. When you try to reshore without the systems, right? Good systems default to good outcomes, bad systems default to bad outcomes, and Trump defaults to fucking chaos, right? That's basically what we're getting. But the other thing you gotta understand too is China. China man is playing some stupid games too. Let's be crystal fucking clear. China man is doing some dip shittery too. That's gonna bite them in the ass, right? Again, with the whole thing of, again, controlling rare earths, right? They control 95% of the rare earth production around the world. Overproduction, right? In order to keep their citizens employed, they're overproducing goods. A lot of their companies are literally in the red, and then they're shipping that shit all around the world. That's destroying industries in other countries, right? They're doing a lot of dipshittery, right? Anyways, and so basically you have the United States doing dipshittery, and you have the Chinaman doing dipshittery. And so now we're in this world where there's an interesting question of what happens when a refresh cycle is not something that can be counted upon. What happens if you are a system administrator, you're an IT director, you're a CIO, a CTO? What happens when you cannot count on the ability to be able to do a 5-year refresh cycle? What does your planning look like going into the future? And I think that's one of the things that people really have to start considering now is there's so much stuff that has been taken for granted. And as that falls apart, what does your planning look like going forward? But anyways, the latest thing happening in this country that I currently live in that is not what I recognize as the United States of America is apparently the Trump administration will start setting price floors. So this is the other thing to be thinking about, CIO, CTO. So again, if you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and you buy one of these things, the price is the price. One of the things, what happens when you have a company of 10,000 people? What happens when you have a company of 10,000 people? And all of a sudden, the administration decides that they are going to set price floors. This is the minimum a product can be sold for. Question from the Aspie in the back. Who gets to decide what that price should be? Who gets to decide what the Trump administration states is a reasonable price? And one of the things you got to understand, right? No shame, no hate. But why do CEOs CEO? So they can buy really fucking big yachts. So if they're sitting there like, wow, China is really undercutting us, and I cannot make enough profit to buy a big yacht. And then the Trump administration comes in and says, hey, so what would the price floor need to be for you to be able to buy a big yacht? Well, if I'm a CEO, you know what would go through my mind? Man, I was gonna buy a 100-foot yacht. But if the Trump administration is gonna, goose some stuff, I mean, look, a CEO like me, I think I really deserve a 150-foot yacht. So what is the minimum price floor in order to make sure my employees get a living wage and get health care and all that kind of stuff? Well, that's like $1 a widget. $1 a widget would be a price floor for that. But that doesn't get me a 150-foot yacht. So, I don't know, let's say $2 per widget. And then the other CIOs, CTOs, they have to buy these products now at scale. All of a sudden, the prices go through the damn roof. And it's one of those things I find funny, like with the auto manufacturers in the United States. We were told, we have been informed by the auto manufacturers of the United States that Americans do not want inexpensive electric vehicles. The reason Ford and GM and these other companies do not sell inexpensive electric vehicles is not because they're not willing to do it. They are willing to do it. But the American people just don't want it, right? That's what we've been informed. And then Chinaman is willing to sell, low-cost electric vehicles. And so if Americans don't want it, you almost feel bad for the Chinaman. Like, oh, look, Chinaman wants to sell shitty-ass products no American wants. Right? Fine. If no American wants it, have the Chinese come over, have them try to sell their shitty-ass cars, have them get their asses whipped because Americans want F-150s. It's all good. Right? We have an open market. They failed in the open market. The funny part is, right? Then when China does start to want to sell these inexpensive electric cars in the United States, we hear from Ford and GM and the other U.S. auto manufacturers that if you allow China to sell these vehicles into the United States, it will destroy the U.S. auto sector. And you're like, but wait a minute. You stated that you know that Americans don't want that. You stated that you're not manufacturing those types of cars because Americans do not want them. So if China is selling vehicles in the United States that Americans don't want, why should this be a concern? Oh, because what's really happening is you make more money selling F-150s than you do Yaris's, and therefore you basically want to eliminate Yaris's and only sell F-150s. That sounds a lot like your business issues and not like my fucking problem. But I cannot buy an inexpensive electric vehicle in the United States because Ford and GM and the rest of it want to protect their profit margins. And think about that. Think about that. Think that through. And then now listen to the Trump administration saying that they're going to set price floors. Right? Anyways, did I show you this? Yes, I think I did. Trump administration will set price floors across range of industries to combat China, Besant says. We are going to keep whipping the American people until China submits. Lordy, are you tired of winning yet? We've been winning. We've been winning for 7 whole months. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. I'm not sure my bank account can deal with winning much longer. The Trump administration will set price floors across a range of industries to combat market manipulation by China. It's going to combat market manipulation by China. It's not about boosting. It's not about boosting the profit margins of particular sectors in the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told CNBC in an exclusive interview Wednesday, quote, when you are facing a non-market economy like China, then you have to exercise industrial policy. So when you're fighting a non-market economy, you have to become a non-market economy. Bessent told Sarah Eisen, quote, so we're going to set price floors and the forward buying to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and we're going to do it across a range of industries, the secretary said. Without naming specific industries, the administration was looking at beyond rare earths. And so it does look like this is going to be beyond rare earths. So there could be an argument for the whole rare earth thing. Again, China produces, refines, whatever, something like 95% of the world's rare earths because we outsourced all of it to them. This whole rare earths thing is not a new conversation. We've been talking about this shit for 25 years, right? Anyway, it was like 10 years ago. 10 years ago, China used the whole rare earth thing against Japan. So this isn't even the first time they've used rare earth policy to smack the shit out of a major industrialized country. But now, for whatever reason, we're taking it seriously. So the idea here is that China doesn't care about pollution. China doesn't care about a lot of things. That's why they can produce these rare earths more economically. So if you set a price floor for rare earths in the United States, that will help boost the rare earth companies here, right? And so you look at this, you know, how much rare earth goes into a full device. It may be relatively small, right? So let's say you get the rare earths from China and they cost you $1. You then put a price floor of $2 so that companies in the United States can make a profit of rare earths. But out of this entire phone, maybe 5% of it is a rare earth material, right? So a 20th of it. So if you pay, let's say $1,000 for this phone, maybe you boost the entire price by $50. That's still a lot. And again, you don't know what the numbers are, but that's the thing. Like if it's like, okay, it's this one particular size, it's only gonna be rare earths, so it's gonna boost the price by 5%. But also remember, you're boosting the price of 5% after the steel tariff and after the aluminum tariff and after the stacking China tariff. after the other stuff going on. Remember, all this stacks up. But maybe just on the face of it, you can say, okay, fine, maybe rare earths. But the thing you have to be thinking about, without naming specific industries beyond rare earths, so what happens when they start setting price floors, not for 5% of this device, but maybe 10% of this device or 20% of this device, right? The Trump administration has taken a 10% equity stake in Intel. Right? What if they start putting price floors in for chips or processors or that type of thing? What if they start putting price floors in for the batteries? What if they start putting price floors in for other stuff out there? Where does this all go? I think my viewpoint, if I was still in a decision-making capacity, which thank the spaghetti monster, I am not, I just get to sit here and scream into a webcam, is I would really be looking at shifting the institutional capabilities within the tech departments to being able to maintain and repair equipment, right? I used to work for a company called Manugistics way back in the day. And it was interesting. They were one of the only companies I was in. They had two guys that their job was actually to repair the laptop computers. So they bought the high-end Toshiba laptop computers. So back in the day, Toshiba was weird. They had really shitty computers. If you bought a $300 or $400 Toshiba computer, it was a piece of garbage. It was a paperweight. But if you bought the $2,000 Toshiba computer, it was fucking awesome, right? Had aluminum frames and all that kind of stuff inside. Anyways, Manugistics, I think they had 2,000 employees. Anyways, they had two full-time employees. So almost all employees were issued these Toshiba laptops. And there were two guys that basically, they had their little room fucking stacked with these laptops. And whenever there was a hardware repair, the hardware repair came to them and they could rip that entire, the laptops apart, put them out back together, and send them out again, right? And the idea was, okay, you're gonna buy a high quality laptop computer, they want that repair capability. So the company had the repair capability, they had the two guys that were actually able to do it, and that was their full-time jobs, right? That kind of thing is basically gone now. Again, I've only actually seen it once, and it's definitely gone now, right? Most companies that I talk to, even when they have like Mac computers or whatever, the idea is that they just buy more than they need, right? So they buy Apple Care. So they buy Apple Care for the length of time that they need between the refresh cycles. And then they just buy a few extra ones so that when a Mac gets broken or whatever, they give the employee one of the surplus Macs that they have. They then take that Mac, they usually put on a shelf, they get 5 or 6, and they send all 5 or 6 to Apple for them to get repaired. One of the things to be thinking about, though, is think about the repair process now, like what Louis Rossmann complains about. So much stuff with the repair process now, you're not just replacing just the screen or just the keyboard. It's a lot of component here. You're replacing that thing plus a lot more. What happens when it becomes harder to get access to that lot more? What happens when you have Apple Care and Apple Care says, look, we will repair it as soon as we get the parts in? Is that kind of system going to make sense basically over the next 5 years? I think these are things to be pondering and to be thinking about, right? Because this is all wonky, and I don't think it can be rolled back quickly, right? The issue is with so much of the stuff that the Trump administration is doing right now, it will take a long time to fully play out. We see it, right? I talk about all these different articles. I talk about how we are seeing the impact of the administration's policies, but it seems small. But the argument I try to give you folks is, remember, when Bear Stearns fell, most of us did not give a shit when Bear Stearns fell. The only reason I knew Bear Stearns fell back in the day is because every morning I read the Wall Street Journal, right? I grabbed my cup of coffee, I'd read the Wall Street Journal. So I was like, oh, look, Bear Stearns fell. That was about the long and the short of it, motherfuckers. It was like, oh, sucks to be them. Credit default swaps. Thank God I didn't buy those damn things. Right? That was about it. Right? As I've said, it takes a long time for everything to flesh out. And the thing is, once everything does flesh out and you figure out where you're at, it takes a long time for things to get repaired. After the Great Recession, it took a long time. It took years before things got to vaguely normal. And even with the vaguely normal, it was with really horrible interest rate policies and all the things. I would argue the Great Recession never really ended. Basically, we went into the Great Recession. We had emergency policies that went into place. Then wealthy people really liked those emergency policies, so they just kept them going way too long. But anyways, right? It takes a while for things to flesh out. So if we're going into this economic global technological idiocy, and you think even when we hit the bottom, who knows where the bottom is, it will then also take a commiserative time to get back out again. We are looking at like a 5-year time frame at the minimum, if this doesn't just shake everything up entirely and really change the dynamic. Think about this, right? When you go back to the 1990s, the idea that almost no electronics we buy would be repairable we wouldn't have conceived of that. That's not an idea we had. The idea of a 3-year refresh cycle, it wouldn't have made any sense back in the 1990s. Wait a minute, I'm going to spend $2,000 or $1,000 on this thing, and then I'm going to have to buy basically the exact same thing again in 3 years, right? If you had told somebody that in 1996, they'd be like, I don't get it, right? But because of economic policy, because of politics, right? Because of China getting the WTO, again, you talk about how politics shifts, politics shifts, the technology landscape, right? China getting in the WTO, our world would not look like what it does if that had not occurred. You being a technology professional in 2025 looks different because China going into the WTO than it would look if they hadn't gotten the WTO. So as everything is shifting now, the thing to be thinking about, what does this matter? Where does stuff shift to? And then make your bet. Again, remember, at the end of the day, it's all a bet. It's always a bet. So anyways, what do you think about this with price floors? What do you think about the United States setting price floors across a range of industries? And being Trump, we don't know what those range of industries are, right? Even if you're sitting there and like, look, rare earths, as I say, sometimes I agree with Trump. Again, from a 30,000 feet view of things, I agree with Trump. Not how he actually does it, right? Anyways, if you say rare earths, okay, rare earths are so cheap in the Chinese market, the only way to make them viable again in the United States is with these price floors. That will increase each electronic device by $20, but that is a price that we need to pay for our country, right? Even you're like, okay, yeah, but think about this. It's a range of industries, and we're not being told what those range of industries will be. Who gets to decide what those range of industries, right? Since the legislative branch, right? Since the GOP, right? They're just castrated fucking poodles, pissing over themselves, trying to pretend to be alpha dog. Look, aren't we good alpha dogs? Right? They're not doing their damn jobs. So this all falls under Trump. And what does Trump then decide? And how does that affect what you're doing? And what do you think about all the stacking stuff, right? Well, Eli, it is worth paying $20 more for an iPhone if we can, whatever. But it's like, well, it's $20 for their rare earths, and the steel, and the aluminum, and the stacking tariffs, and everything else. Again, it's not the $20 I care about. It's when the iPhone costs $5,000. Paid $1,020 for an iPhone, right? Okay, fine. Paying $5,000 for an iPhone, that becomes the issue. Anyways, what do you think about all this stuff? Put your thoughts down below. If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up. If you hate these videos, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing. Call me a moron. Just be a real lutnick and do it down there in the comment section. Do remember silicondojo.com is what I actually care about. We're doing our next class on Wednesday. We have one seat that is currently open. It is free to the end user. We actually get paid through crowdfunding. There is a donor box link down below. If you want me to teach people how technology actually works, you want to support the cause, think about throwing some money down there. And with that, see y'all later.